Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's session. We were just getting live on Facebook. I hope you were all able to join the Valve Disease Day flagship event at Piedmont Heart as a part of the Valve Disease Day virtual conference. They had a great patient-friendly treatment discussion. If you weren't able to join, no worries. The recording will be shared. But right now, we are joined by some fabulous valve disease patients. I am Andrea Baer, the Executive Director here at Mended Hearts, and we're going to be talking this session about revolutionizing peer support for patients. So before we begin, all attendees are in listen-only mode. If you can't hear, please check the audio button on your personal computer to assure the sound is on. Type any of your questions that you may have into the Q&A box during the presentation and during our panel discussion. I will read the questions while we have a Q&A at the end. And then a PDF version of the slides, as well as a recording of the presentation, will be available on the Mended Hearts website following the event. Again, I'm Andrea Baer, the Executive Director here at Mended Hearts. Our mission is to inspire hope and improve the quality of life for patients and their families through ongoing peer-to-peer support, education, and advocacy. And we're so excited to be a partner of Valve Disease Awareness Day. So let's just dive right in. A couple of things I wanted to kind of talk about before we talk about how we're doing peer support is why peer support is important. It is so incredibly important because it does things like reduces feelings of isolation and depression. It creates more confidence in making decisions. It provides a social support to stick to lifestyle changes and treatment plans. If you've ever had a gym buddy, you know, you don't want to let them down, but you will let yourself down, right? But if they say, hey, come on, are you coming? You're going. It also creates meaningful connections that improve your health and well-being, but it also increases access to health information and resources through networks such as Mended Hearts. Our accredited visiting program is peer-to-peer. So patients are visiting patients, parents are visiting parents, caregivers are visiting caregivers, because we always want to make sure that we can say, we know how you feel because we've been where you are. Really important for that piece of it. We do have an accreditation for all of our visitors. And we have different trainings depending upon if you're in person, you're in the hospital, you're virtual. But we have accreditation program that all of our visitors go through, and they learn things like active listening, you know, how to make sure that all the HIPAA laws are being abide by, because we do hospital and bedside visiting. We had support group meetings, telephone visiting, and before COVID, we were reaching over 200,000 people annually with these one-on-one peer supports. But then in 2020, we had our hospital visiting shut down, our in-person support education meetings shut down, but people needed support then more than ever before. So I like to call what we did the great pivot for any of my friends out there. We said, how can we make sure that this is not going to be the end of supporting patients? So in the height of the pandemic, what our response looked like was that we immediately started working on where can we meet patients at, and obviously that was online. We started Zoom accounts for all the chapters and groups. We started training our visitors on how to support others virtually. And Jody was like a godsend. She trained visitors every other week. She trained people on Zoom 101 and Zoom 102, constantly training people on how to support others in a virtual world. Because it is a little different than sitting beside each other, right? All of our services were launched virtually, so now we can educate and support and advocate all virtually. And we also provided timely information and support for patients and families through the pandemic. A lot of stuff about COVID, but we also tried to make sure that, hey, we still have to take care of our hearts, even though COVID is here. And so let's see what we can do about that. We launched My Heart Visit in August of 2020, and our contact center went live in 2020 as well. And I know Bruce and Lee are going to talk about that in just a little bit. We also shipped iPads. So we were able to get iPads to ship to hospitals around the nation that patients could use to access these online services, right? Because not everybody has an iPad or not everybody has an iPhone where they can just go online and get that information. The My Heart Visit app was launched and on iOS and at the Google Play Store, so they could download it on their own phone if they have it. If not, we ship the iPads to the hospitals for patients to be able to reach out to us. We trained all of our accredited visitors to be able to do virtual visiting. These are just some of the numbers. I think they're amazing that we had almost 1,600 hours spent in 2021 supporting other people virtually. 678 of our visitors were trained to do the program virtually. And Jody, 27-hour-long trainings were held to support training of Zoom and online support for visitors. So all of this to say, we took what we were doing in person and we launched it virtually. Is it the best? Absolutely not, right? Being together is so much more important. But since we couldn't be together, and sometimes we still can't be, this is the second best thing. We open online discussion communities where you can talk to each other online, kind of like a discussion board, Facebook type of thing, where you can go there and get your questions answered. You can give support if you're looking for a way to support other people. People are always asking questions there, and it's fabulous to be able to share some of your personal journey and experience with others. And then we also started doing Facebook chats. And it's funny because we're still doing Facebook chats 2 years later because they're fun. It's every Monday night at 7 o'clock, a whole bunch of us just get on the Mended Hearts Facebook page and we just talk. And it's never about medical. It's not intense. It's not super educational. What it is fun conversation and friendship building. And some of the people come back every single week for the past 2 years. And they're like, hey, how was your week? How was your daughter's dance recital? Because we knew it was coming up. That's the kind of connection we like to make sure that we are fostering. And then we started thinking about what happens now when the world goes back to being in person. What do we do? Well, virtual is still really important. And the reason for that is because we know that this is opening access and opportunity to so many more individuals, people who may not have been able to access our services due to geographic location, or maybe they're immune compromised or they're homebound. They don't have a car to get to meetings and to be with other people. It's also scalable because we can reach so many more people doing what we're doing. And we can expand into areas where we may not have that in-person support yet. And then obviously it attracts and raises awareness to the organization and to heart disease, which is really a big goal, because the more people who know about heart disease, more people who know about valve disease will be diagnosed earlier and have better outcomes. And so it's super important for us to do all of that awareness. So now we're going to get into the meat of the discussion, and I'm going to introduce our two guest speakers who I'm so excited are here with us today. Bruce Roberts is a member and a visitor in Chapter 106, which is in Chicago since 2012. They visited in the Northwestern Memorial Hospital before COVID, but now he's an active member of the My Heart Visit program. Bruce had a heart transplant in 1996 and an aortic valve replacement in 2012. And we also have Lee Parker, who is a congenital heart patient who underwent open heart surgery in 2016 to replace her aortic valve and repair an aortic aneurysm. During her recovery in the hospital, Lee was visited by a Mended Hearts accredited visitor, and that visit inspired her to give back to other heart patients. She currently volunteers for Mended Hearts as an assistant regional director for the Southwest region. She's a chapter president and an accredited visitor in the Houston area. So I am going to stop sharing my screen so that we can see you all. And thank you so much for joining us today. So I think I want to start. I'll start with you, Lee, because you're at the top of my screen. Why don't you just share a little bit about your experience in visiting patients, why it's important, and how you've kind of made a difference the past couple of years.
Sure. So when people ask me why I visit, why I want to be a volunteer with Mended Hearts and visit, my short answer is always because someone did it for me. So a visitor came to my hospital room and gave me hope and inspired me to want to help others. So I found my way to a Mended Hearts meeting, and I right away wanted to become an accredited visitor. Why I love it is because what I didn't bank on was not only I went to give back, but I didn't realize how much would return to me, how rewarding it would be for me to be able to see heart patients and help them along their journey. It's a scary thing to have open heart surgery. And when I had open heart surgery, I didn't know anybody that ever had heart surgery. So it was a daunting situation in my life. And I really didn't want people to have to go through that alone. I had tons of family and friends around me, but nobody that knew anything about heart disease or heart surgery. So I think that the peer-to-peer support part is very, very powerful. Talking to other patients who've been there, who know what you're going through, is just so much better than just, family and friend support.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And Bruce, why don't you share a little bit about your journey? Why do you feel it's so important to be a visitor?
You got my start being a patient too. I had the heart transplant. Everything went well, but I lost 80 pounds. I'm losing hair, and you wonder if anything's going to be normal again. Well, these guys who'd had heart transplants come to visit me, and they're these normal-looking people. And it finally got through to me, I'm going to get out of this. In fact, even one of them, he showed a picture of himself when he was sick. And he looked as bad as I did back then, and now he looks normal. This was back before HIPAA, so we weren't always, sometimes, hey, get your lazy self out of bed. And, that's how we talk to each other. We got to know each other. For a few years, I had to handle some family things. Most of my family, I didn't visit for a while. So about 2010, 11, I found out about Mended Hearts from being a patient at Northwestern. So we got the chapter going on. Unfortunately, I had a valve surgery at that time. Mended Hearts people came to visit me. But it's great. You go and visit the patients. It's very rewarding just to watch them calm down while you visit them, or just put them at ease. And they always, they just look at us, and I started visiting a few weeks after that last surgery, and wow, you just had it a few weeks, you look great, and they don't seem interested. I'll play the transplant card, and then that gets their attention. How many years? And it's like, no, it's wonderful. See, I miss the face-to-face very much, and hopefully we'll be doing this. So.
Yeah, I completely agree. And you said something so important, and it really made me think about my journey with my son, that you saw a way through when you were looking at the people who were visiting you, right? And that was
right.
So life-changing, really, that you could see, like, there is really another side to this. So, like, I'm not going to be stuck here forever. I can get through this. And that hope that you are able to give a patient when you're visiting them is just so vital to your success, to their success, right? So Lee, tell me, about virtual visiting. What has inspired you to keep going? I mean, we're going on 2 years now, and
I know.
what inspires you to keep going?
Well, like I said before, visiting was very rewarding. And so certainly when COVID hit and I wasn't able to I visited in 2 different hospitals. When I wasn't able to do that, I wanted to continue it. And I was reminded that just because we're in the midst of a pandemic doesn't mean there aren't heart patients who still need support. I was very proud of the pivot that Mended Hearts made, so that we could continue to reach heart patients, because just because the pandemic was going doesn't mean that people don't still need connection and support, maybe more than ever. I know that most of the hospitals either completely shut down or very seriously limited the amount of family visits. And I think that people who are in the hospital having a heart procedure, if they're alone, they really need, they more than ever need someone to connect to. So I was very glad, and I was very happy to get trained and to sign up and start working in the call center.
Yeah, that we so love that you guys are there doing what you're doing every day. Our call center is, it's staffed. I don't want to say staffed. You guys don't get paid. It's all volunteer, but it's you guys are there all of the time. And we try to have coverage all day long so that when people are calling in, they get somebody on the other line. Bruce, I know you're like our rock star in the call center. You're there a lot, scheduling visits. What have you found when people are calling you? Does anything resonate with you about what's happening in their life that makes them call?
It's almost like visiting the people in the hospital. They have sometimes, I think some of these people who call sometimes are more worried than the patients I met in the hospital, or they wouldn't be calling the hospital. We just drop in on them. But yeah, well, I like it too, because just for one thing, it's been 2 years, and just to stay in practice doing this. But yeah, get a lot of them. They, I think most of them want the phone calls. I don't know what that is. Maybe they more at ease or something, or maybe someone at their age who just not that, technically.
Yeah, but that's nice about the call center, because you can do telephone if they don't want to do Zoom, but hey, if they want to do Zoom and see a face, then we can do that as well, which I think is fabulous. But I think you're right. I think people for a really long time have been in a vulnerable position. They've been isolated and they're dealing with scary stuff outside of COVID, not talking about COVID, in a world that has was really scary for a long time. So you couple those 2 things together and it's very isolating and very scary to be sitting at home alone and not having the ability to talk to other people who know how you feel. So, Lee, I have a question. So I know that you know Alberta, who is a longtime visitor. What kind of words of wisdom has she shared with you over the years about visiting patients?
Well, just to be clear, she was my visitor. And I distinctly remember I was still bandaged after my surgery, and she was standing at the edge of my bed. And just a very, very bright spot in my day. And she said that she had had open heart surgery 20 years before. And I distinctly remember thinking, if she can do it, I can do it. And I kept, you get a lot of paperwork and things when you get out of the hospital, but thankfully I had kept the Mended Hearts information. I found my way to her, and the very first meeting, I walked up to her and she said, "Oh, you came to the meeting?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am, I did." And I said, "And I want to be a visitor just like you." And she said, "Really? Seriously?" I said, "Yep, I want to be just like you," because it made such an impression on me. I literally had a lot of people and family. I was very blessed to have the support of friends and family, but it was, like I said earlier, just so neat to see her. And over the years, she is our visiting chairman in my chapter. She has continued. She would take the bus to go to the hospital and continue to see patients all day long. As she was awarded things with the hospital. I mean, everyone at the hospital just loved her. And so she continues to be my inspiration. Anytime I feel down, I think about Miss Alberta and I think, I got to follow in those footsteps. I have to keep going. She's truly an inspiration.
Yeah, it's fabulous. Bruce, when you were visited by heart transplant patients, what stuck out to you the most as like, this is something that I'm going to be able to get through? Is there anything that the visitors did or said that made you feel that hope that you needed?
Yeah, well, yeah, because I met all kinds of guys coming in there, very different people. Just one thing, just by them being there at all, even if they're not that good of visitors, is helpful. But one I remember in particular, I told you, the middle-aged businessman who came in, what are you doing in my bed? You know, and I go, you? I always liked his style. No drama. He was very relaxed about everything, and showed the picture of himself when he was sick. And I was like, God, you look like as bad as I did, and now he looks great. He was very, that's fine. You'll get out of here, and I'll see you at the transplant picnic. And I did. And I believe he's still around. He's got to be in his 70s. He was about a year before I was. But just, less than a year later, he looked great. But just all of them, and they just look at and we're having active lives. They just let you know it's just going to take a little while. So I try to, the transplant patients now I talk to, especially the young ones, when are things going to be normal again? Young ones, I'll tell them, you go back to work, then it gets real normal. The days are over. But just tell them that it's going to be a while, and then after so much, then they'll ask you how much time before you start feeling better. I'll tell them, but latest surgery, I'm older than some of the patients. I was fairly young when I had the transplants. Yeah. But, yeah, just seeing them, it is, and just some of their style, and I try to carry it over. Not being dramatic. Sometimes there's some people come in and say to me, "Be positive," and all. Well, I hated that, so I never, no, I'll be positive tomorrow. Today I'm going to be sulk. So I never push that on the patients, and just, yeah, this will happen, and until you get on them a little if they go on too long about it.
And I think sometimes that's what's so important, right? Is that when you're supporting somebody, it's okay to be like, this is really crappy. This is a crappy situation, and I'm really sorry you're going through it. You just got to go through it, right? Instead of trying to fix it. And I think that that's where understanding the journey comes into play when you're working with peer support, is that we know it's crappy. We're just telling you that you're going to be able to get through it, whatever the crappy situation is. So you both have had valve disease, and today is Valve Disease Awareness Day. Can you start by telling me why raising awareness of valve disease is so important to you?
Yes. Well, I did not know anything about congenital heart disease or valve disease until I was 40 years old, went for a regular routine checkup, and the doctor sent me to a cardiologist. And that's when my defect was discovered. And I realized that a lot of people aren't aware of valve disease. I mean, I had been going to the doctor for a long time. Nobody told me about my murmurs. So I feel like it's one of those the awareness is not as high as it should be. I also know that once a heart patient, you're a heart patient for life. And one of the things that I've learned is connecting with people and learning, because there's constant changes. When I first was diagnosed, the valves that were available to me when I first was learning about valves are not the same ones that ended up when it was time for me to have my surgery. So there's constant change, and you have to be aware of different techniques. Now we can do TAVR, and that wasn't available for lower risk patients when I first had surgery. So being aware of that, staying on top of the advances, I think is really important. I also think that once you're a heart patient, you have to stay in care. And because I'm a congenital heart patient, this is a mantra I carry for all heart patients, though, and that is stay in care. Continue to see your doctor. It doesn't go away. And I learned that in visiting. I think this is a silver lining with COVID. You know, we were all focused on seeing patients in the hospital, and certainly that's a very critical time when patients are having surgeries or procedures or an event. But then you realize they go home. Well, they still may need support. They still may be having a new a diagnostic test that they're unfamiliar with after they get home. And I think that's a benefit of the visiting that's online, the virtual visiting, and that it continues to give people an opportunity to connect, not just a one and done, like just not in the hospital, but they can continue to receive support. Someone can call that Heartline. And matter of fact, I can remember a lady that when I was working on the Heartline called. It was the first time she was alone. Her daughter had come to stay with her after surgery, and it was the first time she was alone, and she was a bit afraid. And I remember that feeling. And so when she called, I could relate to that. And it dawned on me that this virtual visiting really needs to be here to stay. I'm glad to be back in the hospital. I'm back in the hospital visiting in person, but I want to be able to do both because I think there's benefit and advantages to both. We have to connect with heart patients any which way we can.
Yeah, and meet them where they are, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes they're not at the hospital. I think that's
right.
so
Right.
important. And what about you, Bruce? Why is Valve Disease Day important to you?
Well, I was a little different because when I got the transplant, they told me about that the valve was defective and said you might have to do something in 15 years. 16 years it was. But one thing I did notice it was important about it. They were monitoring me all this time. I had a murmur and all this. Finally got to the point says we got to do something about this. I didn't notice any symptoms when they're telling me this. So really have to. So that's you don't know you have it. And finally, I felt it a couple of weeks before the operation. I got to do something. Yeah, I agree with Lee too. That this is good that we do in the virtual because it covers it a whole different way along with my visiting. And I hope to keep that up once we go back live, which I hope is soon.
Yeah, I think we're getting there. I think that we're getting to live again. We just have to be a little more patient, right? I think we're all like jumping at the bit, getting back in person. But it's so important. I think that there's a question, so I'd like to take that now and just let everybody else know that if you want your question asked or if you want to talk to the panelists, please type it in your chat box. Just looking at this question now. So this is probably not a question for the visitors, but what she's asking is she has DeJour's syndrome, which is also known as 22q deletion. She has a bicuspid aortic valve and an aortic aneurysm, and she's 42, and she just found out her son has a bicuspid aortic valve too. And she wants to know, does her son need to be watched for getting an aneurysm as well? So we're not doctors, so we can't answer doctor questions, although I can tell you that the answer is yes. You need to make sure that you and your son are staying in care and seeing your doctors and monitoring conditions, because like Lee and Bruce both, you don't know that you're sick, right? Your valve is sometimes sicker than you even know. So those signs and symptoms are so important to recognize, but more importantly is staying in care and seeing your doctor on a regular basis. We had some issues during COVID where people, rightfully so, were afraid to go to the hospital, were afraid to go get tests done. There were times when doctors and hospitals weren't taking routine patients for a while. So if you are out there and you're listening and you have not seen your doctor, get in to see your doctor and get back in care, because it's so important, because that's how you're going to know what's happening with your heart. My son goes to his appointments every year or every 6 months, whichever, it depends on the year. But in between, he seems fine. And so that's always so critical at the very, during that appointment is, okay, is he really? And, how is his heart looking? Because sometimes those symptoms are just so vague that you wouldn't notice them, especially if you're slowing down. As you get older, sometimes that's something that people will say, well, I'm just getting old, so I can't do this because I'm just getting older. And sometimes that's not the case. So it's important to make sure you're seeing the doctor when you are supposed to, and don't go for more than a year. That's my personal advice. So, okay. We had some questions. Maybe Leslie, you can answer some questions in the chat that I see coming up, because I don't think they're really for the panelists. So we've got visiting happening in person in some places. We've got it happening online. We're getting back to getting together at support group meetings. My advice would be to find out what all we can offer is go to myheartvisit.org. That will give you all of the visiting options that you have. Lee, are you back into 2 hospitals now or just 1?
2.
Both? Great. And Bruce, your hospitals have not opened up yet, you said, in Chicago.
No, it's Northwestern Memorial. We get a lot of heart patients there, though. I was usually going to go once a week. Sometimes I see 10, 12 patients. It can be busy there, but no, we are not returned. There's been a lot of rumors that maybe it'll be soon, but I really don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think we all just have to be a little more patient with how things are playing out, as we know. Can change overnight. So telephone versus Zoom. Tell me which one do you think that patients feel more comfortable on?
Oh, me, well, I've noticed the vast majority request a telephone. The few that have been on Zoom, they're just fine with that. One lady, she was taking lunchtime. She's sitting out in her car eating her lunch and we hit a Zoom conference. But it's the vast majority is phone. I say I don't know if they just like to be a little, feel a little freer that way, or they're just not technically astute on that.
Yeah.
Not the vast majority is phone. So I have to say phone.
And what's really great about the call center or the Heartline is that if a patient wants to be visited or a caregiver wants to be visited at 8 o'clock in the evening when they're off of work, or at 7 o'clock, or even at noon on their lunch hour, they can schedule an appointment, correct? And then you can call them at their scheduled time.
Right. That's how it's been working. You get a notice from you and saying what time they want the meeting is. It's yeah, but there's a lot free. They can call it their convenience. It's different than dropping in on them. It's just different than a live visit.
Yeah, great. All right, I'm going to see if there's any more questions. Just a thank you from Shannon, who we talked to about if her child should be followed, but absolutely should be. So Lee, before we get done, I know we're going to try to be done about 3:45 because we have another presentation coming up at 4. Why don't you give me, why should somebody connect with another heart valve patient, and why should they care about their heart valve?
Okay. I'm going to share another story. There was a lady that I met through the Connect pages that you referred to earlier, and she asked if I would have a conversation with her. And it was because she was in care with her doctor and they were watching her heart valve. And when it was time for her to have her surgery, she reached back out to me and asked if we could have a conversation because we had just been, connecting online. And I said, absolutely. And we shared, we got on the phone and I think we talked for almost an hour, which is a really long time, but we hit it off in a lot of ways. But I think what she really wanted to do was to connect with someone that was her age, that had the same that's bicuspid aortic valve and an aortic aneurysm like me. And she had really practical questions. And I think that's where a peer support visit really helps, is because she was asking me things about, what could she do in advance to prepare her family? Did she need to have a hospital bed or a chair? I mean, they were more daily life type of questions. And, like Bruce said, when to go back to work and things, but not all of them were really medical questions. And I think that's a really important distinction. When we're visitors, we're, like you mentioned at the top, we're not giving any medical advice. We're talking about practical advice. You can't sleep on your stomach or your side after you have open heart surgery. As a female, what type of undergarments do you wear? These are questions that you really aren't asking your doctor, and you really want to talk to somebody who's been through that. I think, like you mentioned earlier, I didn't know that I needed surgery until I went to my next visit, where I heard the magic words, "It's time for your surgery." The day before my surgery, I walked 2 miles. So, it wasn't like you said, I didn't think it was time. Wasn't that I was completely shocked because I had been followed, but I didn't expect to hear the words quite then. I was hoping that I had a little bit more time. So I think it's really important for people to be aware that valve disease is a little bit silent, and you need to really be visiting your doctor on a regular basis. Don't miss those appointments. I thank God every day that I, for 12 years, went every 6 months to my appointments, because without that valve, I wouldn't have lived another year. So I'm very, very grateful for the valve I got. I continue to watch it. I have a bioprosthetic valve, and so it needs to continue to be monitored and take care of my health and continue to help other heart patients. That's where I'm at.
Well, thank you. And how about you, Bruce? Any last words of wisdom from a valve patient perspective or a heart transplant patient perspective that you'd like to share?
Well, the valve, I was just like Lee, the day of my surgery, I walked a mile because I missed the bus. It was the same thing. But I knew it's one thing I try to tell the patients, of course, they're always nervous about having to get open heart surgery. Who wouldn't be? And I tell them sometimes just physically recovering from that's the hardest part. But I did notice the patient, after I got the valve surgery, I could even tell that first, second day, my heart's beating normally. And both out of the transplant, and I didn't realize how long I'd been sick. Then it became kind of obvious. I said, boy, this has been bothering me a couple of years. But yeah, you've got to go get checked, like it is a silent killer. And as they told me, you got to do this now or you're not going to be here the end of the year. And after 6 weeks, I went back to work and everything was back to normal again. So, right. And then it's about that time too, then our chapter got going and I started visiting. In fact, to this day, it's been almost 10 years. Some of the same nurses are still there. You walk in and they're always kind of looking at you, they're not even stumbling. Are you okay?
That's so great. Well, thank you both again for doing what you do and for giving so much of your time to help other patients. It's so important. I really appreciate it, from a caregiver perspective and from a Mended Hearts perspective and as a friend perspective. Thank you so much for what you're doing.
Sure.
So coming up at 4 o'clock, everyone who's listening, the next event is hosted by Heart Valve Voice US. They are a patient-led nonprofit that's helping give people with valve disease a voice in their community. Their panel will be discussing the patient and caregiver partner journey, and participants will be sharing their insights for navigating heart valve disease. So you can go to their website at valvediseaseday.org for details on how to join theirs. But they're fabulous as well. And we are hoping that today's conference throughout the day, you guys have all learned some really important stuff. And if you want to connect with other heart patients, you can go to myheartvisit.org. Or if you need to just email, you can email at info, that's INFO, at mendedhearts.org, and you will be directed to whoever it is that's handling the visits. If you want to be a visitor, we would love you to come and join us. We would love you to come and share your perspective and your journey with others. We're open to everybody. Membership is free at Mended Hearts, so you can find us online and join us there as well. So thank you all so much for joining us today. I appreciate it. And you guys have a happy valve disease day. Bye.